Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Gavin Schall, Alex Wolfe, a heartbreaking defeat to the Minnesota Timber. Oh, they won. It didn't feel like it, but they won 96-88 over the Minnesota Timberwolves. A big game for Mitchell Robinson, a nice game for some of the guys off the bench. The starters, they did not play so well, Alex.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Mitch and his big night. I mean, he swung this game and really kept the Knicks in it when their starters were doing everything to lose the game. And the Knicks really did kind of win in spite of the starters. Some of the guys off the bench, Quinten Grimes, Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickly, stop me if you've heard this before, had really good games, but didn't play a ton. Except for maybe with the exception of Grimes, which we'll talk about. But we're going to talk about that and a whole bunch more next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. And we wanted to thank you, as always, for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. In this episode is brought to you by Truebill. Truebill is the new app that saves you money by helping you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't want or need, and can even negotiate better deals on those you want to keep. And they cannot unsubscribe you from our YouTube, so don't even try it. I am Gavin Schall, a play-by-play broadcaster. He is Alex Wolfe, editor-in-chief of the greatest Knicks website out there, The Strickland. Got some love from it was Miro this weekend, Alex, right? Pretty sick.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a nice Christmas gift. That was a good one.
And the New York Knicks getting some love from the health and safety protocols as they kept Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell, and Karl Anthony Towns out of this game. And if it was any indicator how it went, it probably would have been a loss if any of those guys were playing, because the Knicks absolutely did not play very well in this one. Building up a 17-point lead in the first half, giving it up by the early third quarter. The T-Wolves were still within 5, and basically both teams kind of competed to see who could shoot themselves in the foot better down the stretch, and Minnesota won, but just barely. So not the most satisfying victory for the Knicks, but Alex, in an NBA landscape that is continually devastated by this pandemic, is a win a win? Is that enough?
I guess, it's like, now it's more frustrating because we're so much further into the season, but I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't say a win's a win, because earlier this season when the Knicks were, losing or not losing to, but having very close calls with teams when they were like 5-1, 7-4, whatever they were, they were coming out, with these scrape by wins. And I was kind of just saying, it's the early season. They're still figuring things out, but a win's a win. We're not going to remember this as, a game that they almost blew to the Magic at the end of this year. If they win a bunch of games, we're just going to remember it as a game. And I guess the fact that I still remember those games now at this point kind of maybe proves me wrong a little bit. Like, we are definitely remembering some of these really crappy performances that they've had where they somehow managed to pull out a win in spite of themselves. And, this was just the latest. It was very clear that the Knicks, they came out on fire. They, in the first quarter, I'm going to look up the first quarter numbers here real quick. They were like, everybody except for like RJ Barrett was killing it. RJ had a really tough game in general. He got in foul trouble early in the first half, so that kind of contributed to that. But like, Julius Randle shoots 3 of 6 in the first quarter. Mitch is 2 of 2. Fournier's 4 of 6 with 2 threes. Kemba's 1 of 1 with a 3. And it looked like, okay, they came out ready to play, and this is going to be awesome. And then, our final lines for those guys that I just mentioned were all shooting like 50% or better in the first quarter, except for RJ. RJ shoots 3 for 10 for the game. Julius shoots 5 for 20 for the game. Fournier shoots 5 for 14, and Kemba shoots 3 for 11. I mean, it was just like another one of these games where the Knicks came out and they said that, of course they would never say this out loud, but if we were a fly on the wall in the locker room, they probably were like, oh, like same thing you just said, like, oh, well, we got a gift tonight, guys. No Anthony Edwards, no Karl Anthony Towns, no D'Angelo Russell. Like, we're going to be on cloud 9 here. Let's just go out. We'll get an early lead, and then we'll just shut it down, head on home. And it doesn't work that way. This team literally, on the back of like a turn back the clock performance from Greg Monroe and Jalen Noel and all these other guys playing as well as they did, beat the Celtics last night. And the Celtics are kind of a similar team to the Knicks that have fallen into a lot of the same, traps that the Knicks have this year, as far as underestimating opponents, having their starters play underwhelming ball, that sort of thing. So I don't know when the Knicks are going to learn their lesson as far as all this is concerned. I really hope it's soon. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be soon. But Gavin, thank goodness for Mitchell Robinson in this game and everything that he did. I would say once again, we've said this a few times recently, but I think this is probably his best game of the season, despite not having the gaudiest block numbers in this one. But 14 points, 18 rebounds, 7 of 8 shooting, 2 steals and a block, and the Knicks pretty much owe everything to him as far as this game turning out the way that it did, because he stopped the bleeding a number of times for them in the second and third quarter when the starters couldn't do anything, and he made a lot of key plays down the stretch to win this game.
Yeah, it felt very similar to the Pistons game where this T-Wolves team was just very undersized, and it was like Mitch smelled blood in the water and went to work. And that would almost be frustrating if we didn't get the Hawks game in between, because if not, like even against the Pistons, I sort of felt like, all right, this is the bully who like attacks the little kid, but then someone his size says like, hey, you want to go? And they kind of like run away and hide behind the teacher. And that's sort of been the story of Mitch all year. But then we got that Hawks game where it wasn't that he was overwhelming or that, I mean, I think he only scored 4 points, but he was playing hard and he was sprinting and he was playing with force. And that continued into this game. And I mean, that's been the story for Mitchell Robinson his whole career, right? Process over results, or that at least that's what we've wanted the story to be. And tonight, the process was good again. He was running hard. It felt like he was like the only Knicks starter with a pulse outside of Evan Fournier early, and it was fantastic. Like it kind of, I'm trying to think of the right comparison. It almost reminded me of Anthony Davis when he was at Kentucky. And I remember, I think they played Kansas in the national championship game that year. And there were just all these plays where Kansas would play fantastic defense and a Kentucky guard, maybe it was the Harrison twins, would shoot a 3 or something. And it would be like 4 feet short. And Davis would just pick it up and dunk on 2 people. And that's what kept happening. I mean, Mitch had 2 different buckets. There was one Julius airball, one Kemba airball, where he just caught them like passes and jammed them home. And it felt like he was too big, too athletic. And I'm curious to see how this continues to translate, because we see, I think, the payoff a little bit of the added strength now. Like now that he's in shape, he's just clearly a better rebounder and just has that much more force on top of the athletic ability. The next thing that has to come back is the mobility defensively. And we're seeing more of it and we're seeing more energy at that end, but I don't think he's quite at peak Mitch levels of flying out and blocking threes just yet.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of the 3 blocking. I wanted to throw out a comparison, though. I had this, like, I don't know what made me think of this. Well, actually, I know exactly the moment that I did think of this, but then I had to, like, I don't know what jogged my brain to this moment in Knicks history, but it was one of the many times that Mitch just, like, straight up bullied a guy on the inside on the Wolves. The Knicks were smart about, they sort of were doing something that, like, we were sort of advocating for a little bit, which was throwing the ball into him deep and just kind of letting him, overpower somebody, which was nice. And, they don't always do that. Sometimes it seems like they're only content to throw him a lob and not if he has to do anything himself with it. In this game, they were kind of throwing it to him deep and being like, all right, we see you've got a clear mismatch. Like, there's not a player on the floor bigger than like 6'8" out here tonight. So, we're just going to toss it to you and you can just dunk on them. And what it reminded me of was back in Mitch's rookie year, and this just goes to show how different the times were back then. But Trey Burke in training camp had this quote where he said, Mitch looks like a young Shaq, but skinnier. And in this game, I think that was pretty apt. I mean, it was all just about overpowering the opposition. And it was so Shaq-like in that regard. And just like the amount of times where he would get the ball and you'd be like, okay, there's a defender between him and the hoop, so I guess this will be a little difficult for him. And then he just was like, nope, and just dunked it. And was able to get that verticality and also the strength to just sort of clear out. Like when he does a little 180 turn now, he's clearing the guy out because he's just that big. He's that broad, he's that strong that nobody can really hang with him. That's not a Clint Capella, Joel Embiid, you name it, sized human, of like the more elite bigs in the league. So it's good to see that he's sort of embraced the ability to dominate smaller competition. I hope that we keep seeing more of it, just as with anything good with Mitch. And like this game, again, was like a big step forward, I think, as far as like his conditioning, his self-control, playing basketball like 32 minutes, played some long stretches, particularly like that third quarter when he was like the only guy keeping the Knicks alive in this game. And only 2 personal fouls on a night when some other guys ran into some minor foul trouble. He managed to hold steady while also being the only anchor to the defense for large parts of this game. I mean, I definitely his best game of the season, maybe one of the most impressive games of his career to me to this point. And I know that is really saying something because his flashes have been extremely bright through his first 3 years in the league before this year. But this is just one of his most complete efforts that I've seen in a while, and I was very satisfied with it.
Second highest rebounding total of his career with 18. And with that, we will take a quick break and we'll get into, we'll be optimistic. We'll talk the bench a little bit when we come back. But first, we have to tell you all about Truebill. Do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year with Truebill because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel. Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. And your Truebill concierge is there when you need them to cancel unwanted subscriptions so you don't have to. Truebill has over 2 million users and helps save them over $100 million. So don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now, truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. And with that, we are back on Locked On Knicks, and we're about to be Locked On Bench because I want to put off talking about Julius Randle's 5 for 20 performance for as long as humanly possible. So Alex, I will toss it over to you. A lot of options. Quinten Grimes, just the sheer fact that he played 31 minutes was interesting. Emmanuel quickly, I thought very solid in his return. Obi Toppin, a productive 11 minutes. Where do you want to go out of those 3 guys?
I mean, I think I'm just going to talk about the bench in general, right? Like, and then I'll highlight a couple of the guys, but it boggles the mind that on nights like tonight, obviously the starter's been playing better recently. There's no denying that. Kemba Walker was just the Eastern Conference Player of the Week, which we didn't do an emergency pod for, but it happened. He was the Eastern Conference Player of the Week, so he's been playing great. Randle, at times, especially like the other day against the Hawks, looked phenomenal. So these guys have shown that they could be better recently, but we've seen literally this exact same group play very, very poorly together this year, to the point where they were one of the worst lineups in the NBA at one point, just a month or so ago. I mean, it really was not that long ago. And I don't understand why Thibs still gives them the leash that he does. And, I understand that now at this point, maybe he's trying to be like, all right, well, they're sort of figuring it out, so I got to let them work through their problems. But tonight, there was no working through it. It wasn't just missing shots. It was bad process. It was not trying. It was terrible. And, I know we said we were going to be positive and talk about the bench, which is why I'm going to get into this now. Like, the bench came in, for example, in the third quarter. I mean, the first, 7-8 minutes, the Thibs decided to roll with the starters. Other than the cool stuff that Mitch was able to do, was just absolute hell on earth to watch as a fan. I mean, it was terrible. And luckily, Mitch was able to sort of hold the Timberwolves down a little bit on defense, as far as not letting them, turn what they should have, if this was a full strength team, probably pulled out a 10-point lead out of their butt in that third quarter. But instead, I think they only wound up going up by as much as 2 or 4, thanks to the fact that Mitch was playing really good defense on that end. But I mean, they were just so bad. Randle was being careless. He's back to dribbling the ball 5 feet away from his body, and as soon as a double comes, they're just able to easily poke it away from him. RJ couldn't make anything. And I mean, I understand he did work through some of it in the end of the game, and it's fine to go back to him late. But I mean, the third quarter, he was putrid. He couldn't make anything. Suddenly Kemba and Fournier are completely useless. I mean, just the third quarter numbers were just horrendous. I'm pulling them up now. It's just RJ 0-4, Randle 2 of 7, Fournier 1 of 4, Kemba 2 of 6. And it wasn't good. The only guy that you could maybe make a case for there was Kemba, who at a certain point, he was kind of trying to distribute, but finally just kind of said, all right, enough is enough, and made some shots himself. But then you put in guys off the bench like Grimes, quickly, Obi, and they provided so much awesome energy. And like Obi by himself in the second quarter, or like, end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter, I forget exactly when it was he got in, like came out there and basically, increased the lead by like 9 points almost by himself, just by virtue of hustling so hard, getting out in transition, getting buckets, and doing all the great little things that Obi does every single game that makes us think he deserves more playing time, yet only played 10 and a half minutes and got pulled in the early stages of the fourth quarter after only a few minutes of action because like he had a turnover on the sideline where he traveled because he let his feet get ahead of the ball a little bit. And it's just like, come on, man. Like it's frustrating as a fan to watch like the young player that you're rooting for and want to see do well, like Obi Toppin, go out there and kill it, and then get benched immediately on one or two small mistakes in favor of Julius Randle, who just like was bad in this game. He was just straight up bad. It wasn't just, unlucky shot selection or unlucky shot making. It was bad shot selection, a really poor job of taking care of the ball. It was lack of effort on both ends at various times. It was just a really bad Julius Randle game. And Thibs needs to start holding him accountable like he holds every other player accountable. And I turned this into maybe the referendum on the starters, but I'm so tired of seeing the starters go out there and get chance after chance after chance, and then see some guys on the bench like basically get a one mistake maximum, and then that's it. They're out of there, even if they're contributing extremely positively around the board.
No, it makes sense. I mean, and they're interrelated, right? Because we're always talking about, I mean, which one of them is going to play, who is Thibs going to prioritize. And I mean, the one bench guy that he prioritized over the starters was Quinten Grimes playing 31 minutes, RJ Barrett playing 24, Evan Fournier playing 25. So that is an interesting split and something worth monitoring. I think it was just an episode ago we talked about the possibility that Grimes could replace RJ in the starting lineup. And I think that is obviously contingent on first RJ sort of getting his legs back under him and seeing what he does. We talked about just in terms of fit that could make a lot of sense, but it's pretty clear that Grimes is a force multiplier, whether it's the bench or whether it's with the starters, because I mean, and look, he is not Derrick Rose, but given that Emmanuel Quickley can replicate some of what Rose does from a point guard perspective, and I thought Quickley was excellent in that respect tonight with 4 assists in just 15 minutes. Grimes is shooting, I think it brings some of the same element where I think the strength of the Knicks bench is sort of their verve and their energy and their ability to, I mean, they're frenetic, right? They never really stop moving. Maybe I just said the same thing 4 different ways, but that is the only way to really sum them up. I mean, like it's IQ and Obi, it's Rose getting all the way to the rim. It's like a screen, then a rescreen. I mean, one of my favorite plays of the game was Alec Burks like sprinting to the right side, drawing the defense towards him, bullet pass back the opposite way, immediately into an Obi IQ, pick and roll, get a switch, IQ over the top to Obi for a little layup. And it's little maneuvers like that. And Grimes is shooting, while he's not obviously at this point in his career overall nearly the player that Rose is, it gives you that same room to operate. It's that same sort of respect level that Rose gets when he's going all the way to the rim. And whether that's more beneficial with the starters or the bench, Thibs said, "Por qué no los dos?" He said, that was probably butchered Spanish. It took 9 years and really, but he said, let's try it with both. And Grimes is quickly becoming an integral part of this team. I mean, very reminiscent of almost offensively better, defensively worse version of what we got from Reggie Bullock a year ago, which of course is what we're looking for from Evan Fournier, but that has very much been a mixed bag. I think the benefit of having Grimes in there to some extent is that he doesn't demand nearly the same usage, right? With Fournier, you got to run offense through him for him to be effective. Grimes, he can just sit there and he can make a positive impact.
Yeah. And, his shot making is just so key. Part of it, I talked about Obi, kind of sparking that run in the second quarter, but obviously part of that was that Quinten Grimes just went, bonkers again, and he seems to just kind of like do that in every single game now. He went 3 of 5 from 3 in the second quarter, which actually counted for most of his offensive output for the game. He went a little cold after that, but still, it was 9 quick points that just, he's just so lethal out there with the way that he plays. He's not going to hurt you on defense, and it's looking increasingly like he's going to be a guy that's, even as a rookie, maybe sort of reminiscent of Quickley a year ago, going to shoot like 40% right out of the gate, and there's nothing you could do about it as an opposing defense because he's just like you've been sort of on the hunt for who his like shot doppelganger is. I think like the Twitterverse has spoken and said Allen Houston. But he's just got that buttery smooth jumper that every single time that he gets the ball in his hands and is ready to shoot it, it seems like it's going to go in. And his production, I think, is going to be so key to what the Knicks are doing. And Thibs, I mean, for a guy that is not often super effusive in his praise, was really, really talking him up after this game, and basically said like he does things that are integral to this team. He brings toughness, he brings shot making, he brings defense, and those are all things that we need any given night. And it's starting to sound like, regardless of when everybody gets back from protocols and everything else, which there's not really too many guys that are still out that would threaten Grimes's stature as a as a bench guy at this point. But like, it seems like Grimes has carved out a role in the rotation for himself and is ready to kind of start being a consistent player on this team that's getting a lot of minutes thanks to the things that he can do that Thibs and everybody else on this team really love, because as you said, it's sort of reminiscent of like a younger, little more wet around the ears version of Reggie Bullock that also can do more on offense as a rookie right now than Bullock can in present day. So really, really great game from him. But I'm going to just let everybody know real quick that today's episode is brought to you by betonline.ag. BetOnline has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the college bowl season and the pro football playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to the website betonline.ag or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports, so don't wait to take advantage of the all-new amazing offers available. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Gavin, I'll leave it to you. Do you want to cover another bench player or two and continue being happy, or do you want to move to the starters and get a little angry for a minute?
These are dark times, Alex. You gotta pick happiness where you can find it. I'm gonna go Obi Toppin.
Wait, if I may, how messed up is it that we're like, these are dark times after this is the first time the Knicks have won 2 games in a row in like 2 months? We're still like, damn it.
Yeah.
So unsatisfying.
That's a Knicks fan for you. But Obi Toppin is where I want to go next. You mentioned a little disappointing that he only got 11 minutes, 7 points, tied a career high with 3 assists, which I saw our guy Derek Reifer under the handle Anala Knicks tweeted out. Good stat. I would have assumed it was higher, but he had one absolutely sick assist where he did his classic faux DHO, where he's getting like even like a little like zippier on those. Like he always, in the past, he would sort of almost carry the ball and kind of hold the fake a little bit. Now he's just, it's like he's practiced, like when you practice something a million times, you can just do it in your sleep. He's speeding through it, continues to totally fake out defenders, even when there's no one there, which I don't really get, but it's pretty spectacular. And then drove in through a little lefty slip pass to Taj Gibson for the layup, which was, it was pretty sick. And then in the, I think early fourth quarter, I can't remember who was guarding him, but had an isolation post up, half spin back into an up and under. And that just shows you how much stronger this dude got. I mean, it was what, a year ago where he was getting stood up by Duncan Robinson pretty consistently, or like literally whoever he went up against, he couldn't get an inch. So I thought that was a real pleasant sign of progress for him. And then second straight game, he's hit a 3, baby steps with that, right? 20% or so on the year. But the form is looking a lot better now. It's sort of difference between when Julius Randle is feeling himself and when Julius Randle is doing a shot put. Obi's had so many different looking shots this year. When it looks smooth, it looks really, really smooth. And tonight it looks smooth. So I thought by and large, a great game for him. Heartbroken that he didn't get to play more, but some really great moments for Obi Toppin.
Yeah. And, I definitely would like to highlight too, like I already kind of went into, what I think he did well in this game when I was complaining about Julius Randle, but like his chemistry with IQ is really good. And it's nice to see that it's come along very quickly. We talked about, damn it, I did the pun. But we talked about, when Derrick Rose went down, that that might hurt Obi Toppin the most because those two have like a real connection on the court. And, Rose was great at finding Obi in transition and, hitting him on lobs and everything else. Like all the things that Obi loves to do, Derrick Rose was good at setting up for him. And, so it was reasonable to think, oh, maybe Obi's going to have a little bit of a drop off here. But he and Quickly seem to be having an equal amount of chemistry at this point, which is cool. I love seeing these two guys grow together since they got drafted together. Obviously they're going to be kind of intrinsically linked forever in Knicks lore because of that. And I liked like Obi's first bucket was just kind of like the perfect play, I think, for both he and Quickly, where, Obi got, as you said, he looks stronger now. He actually got a seal on his man low in the post, which, was not something that we could ever really see last year. Like if Obi tried to seal a guy off, under the hoop, which he did, it's sort of like a reverse seal where he wasn't trying to post him up. He was trying to clear the lane for himself to go up for an alley-oop. And, if he would have tried to do that last year against pretty much anybody, they would just kind of shove their butt into him a little bit and he would have flown out of bounds probably. And, this year he's able to do that to his defender quickly, just kind of, slowly probed until the moment was just right. Obi throws that arm up to say, okay, it's time to throw it up there. And Quickly even, didn't throw a perfect lob to him, but like Obi just kind of did that thing that we became so accustomed to with Mitch for so long, where it didn't really matter where the pass was. He just got up so high and, used his body so well to kind of torque himself into the right position that he was able to lay it in on a nice little alley-oop to kind of start things off for both those two. So, yeah, I loved everything from him in this game. It's so seldom ever anymore that Obi comes in and I don't leave thinking like, okay, that was extremely productive. And this is just the latest example, I guess. But we'll see. Hopefully he can start finding some more playing time. I also thought it was really kind of frustrating to see this be a game where even though Thibs had basically moved Taj out of the rotation when both Noel and Mitch were healthy, that like the biggest guy on the Timberwolves today was, I guess, the 22 minutes of Greg Monroe, but that means that there was still 26 minutes where they basically didn't have a real center. I mean, their next biggest guy on the whole team has to be like Nathan Knight, I guess, and he did not seem particularly large. I'm going to click through and just see what his listed height is, 6'10". So, I mean, Nathan Knight was not a particularly big guy. Greg Monroe obviously is kind of a big old school dude, but like this was kind of the perfect game to run some small ball. And that often gets Randle out of his ruts sometimes because I think that having Obi out there running motivates Randle to start running and keep his head up and look for those assists, down the court and whatever. So it's usually good for Randle when Obi's out there. And on top of it, that, the Wolves just didn't have anybody that really could contend with small ball from the Knicks, and they like to run anyway. So the better play would have been to have guys out there that could have been, bouncing up and down the court with them for a few of those bench minutes. But Thibs just never really went to it, which is frustrating. It kind of makes me think that he's about ready to just abandon small ball again, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's not what he wants, right? He wants rim protection on the floor at all times. And I mean, the saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Like Thibs clearly in his time off, like evolved a lot in some ways as a coach. It's hard to get a complete philosophical overhaul, especially when his system last year resulted in the Knicks having, again, like the best or second best defense in basketball, depending on what metric you go by. Times change, rosters change. It would be nice to see him experiment with it, especially because it's by and large had positive results when he has. But I don't think, like, I almost like feel defeated talking about it because it doesn't seem like it's something he's willing to do. Speeding through the rest of the starters, Kemba Walker, 3 for 7 from 3, 0 for 4 from 2. I was a little frustrated with, like, he seemed like he was really taken out of rhythm by how the Timberwolves were defending him. In the first quarter, they were sort of refusing to play drop coverage, not conceding threes. In the second, they went to a zone, but it almost felt like a zone centered around taking the ball out of his hands. And I mean, give Minnesota credit. I think they really disrupted the rhythm that he's gotten the last few weeks. And if you're Kemba, I mean, the lesson is pretty obvious. Just have to continue to stay hyper aggressive, even when a team is playing you in an abnormal way. But instead, I think he made the right play and just swung the ball around, and the Knicks got a lot of open threes. The issue was they missed a whole bunch of those open threes. Evan Fournier, spectacular to start the game, pretty much silent the rest of it. That's all I have to say on him. RJ Barrett, I thought was interesting. Look, just about like all the worst elements of a typical RJ game that you see were all there, right? Where there's just a lack of finishing, and it feels like I always get a little bit of a queasy feeling in my stomach when he has to do like an arm bar to get to the basket, because I'm just thinking, this guy, why can't he just explode by the dude? And obviously, post-COVID, post the month-long stomach illness, still getting back into shape, but that was frustrating. And then down the stretch, obviously made the big three, essentially had the game-winning layup. So hopefully a sign of things to come for RJ. We know there is better in there because he was just flat out a better player last year. I just want to continue to see it, but I don't know, Alex, do you have any thoughts on those three guys?
Yeah, Kemba, I feel the same way. And, on a grand scale, I'm kind of tired of, I can't believe that this year still, after everything that happened last year with how zones would vex the Knicks so much, that they didn't put in more work in this offseason to learn how to play against the zone. I feel like every other team in the NBA knows how to bust a zone except for the Knicks. And it's just like, what are you guys doing? Just start working the ball around the perimeter. Stop trying to ISO to death or, playing right into their hands by driving right into the teeth of the D every time. Maybe drive a little bit, but you want to start whipping the ball around the perimeter and not give them an opportunity to rotate to you fast enough. It's just, I don't know. It's frustrating. And I think you're right. They definitely, props to them. They tried to take Kemba out of this game. And for the longest time, I think Kemba was trying to sort of use that to the Knicks' advantage and find his teammates for shots. But then, especially in that third quarter, they just couldn't make anything. And he actually came through and made a couple threes, I think, in the third to sort of keep the Knicks alive a little bit after, they were just floundering and couldn't make anything. And his attempts at assists were just falling flat. But, Fournier, I'm not thrilled with games like this from him because it's just like, he had a number of wide open shots and good opportunities and just was not making them. And it's kind of just like, dude, your job is to be a scorer. So you got to score, because otherwise you're not serving too much utility out there, because you're not, he let himself be a little lax on defense because the shot wasn't falling. And it seems like that's just the sort of player he is. If the offensive side isn't working, the defensive side isn't going to be working either, because he only really, seems engaged if the shot's going in. So, we got to see better from him sooner than later. RJ, I agree, it's sort of the same thing like what we were talking about with Mitch getting in shape. I think there's just sort of a buffer period with RJ where it's like, all right, he has had a really tough month or so here, where he just seemed like he was getting back into form and then goes out with the COVID illness. We've seen from RJ before, coming off of any sort of long layoff, he's always a very slow starter. And he's like a locomotive, you know what I mean? He's just he just chugs. And it's like, okay, dude, come on. Are we going? Or like a tractor trailer when you get stuck behind them on the road and you're like, you're at a stoplight and you're like, damn it. This guy's going to take 5 minutes just to get up to speed because, these trucks are so slow, but then eventually they get up to speed and they're fine. I think that's sort of just how RJ is as a player. So I'm willing to give him a little longer to, figure things out. I do hope that we start seeing, improvement from him in consistency and just him to stop looking, like you said, quite so overmatched sometimes. It's just I don't understand why a guy with his strength level, which we've seen before, and his body control level, which we've seen before, even if the explosion isn't there, which I don't think either of us have ever really thought that he's the most explosive player. He's kind of more crafty than anything, but he can get to the rim and he has the strength to finish through guys and he has the finesse to make those go in. And I feel like sometimes we just don't even see that. And it's just he gets in there and he gets to the point where previously when he's at his best, we've seen him convert those shots. And instead they're just way too strong or way too weak and, don't end up going in. And it doesn't make too much sense to me why he can't have that consistent gear all the time, but hopefully the rust shakes off soon. Trying to think who else to talk about in this game. Actually, one thing I'm kind of curious about, I wish we had like an Elias Sports Bureau to check this for us, because I don't feel like going through a bunch of game logs. But is this the first time that Mitch has ever led the Knicks in scoring in a game?
Oh, wow. That's a good question.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that till I was looking at the box score, but I'm like, man, I guess it kind of speaks to the putridness of this game overall. But Mitch led the team in scoring with 14 points. One of 5 Knicks in double figures in this game. Is it pretty just underscores just how impressive his game was, I guess, that he was the top scorer for the team, despite it not seeming that way in live action. But maybe that'll be something we can look up before the game tomorrow. See if
Yeah, so his all-time career high was against the Bulls, February 29th, 2020. And in that game, he led the Knicks in scoring by 1 point over Julius Randle. So there you go.
There we go. Well, I guess that answers that. Boom.
Yeah, get Elias Schall. But yeah, yeah, he was. Yeah, I mean, rare outing for him. I mean, I think it's so funny that this was one of his best offensive games of the season, and I was not in the best state of mind when we were doing these. But in my bold preseason predictions, I thought he would get to 15 points per game, and 14 was a near season high. So if anyone wants to take me down a notch, that would be a good way to do it. But on that happy note, we will wrap up this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. For Alex Wolfe, I am Gavin Schall. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will be back with you tomorrow night for another game recap. Until then, be good. Peace out. Talk to you soon.